My name is John Campbell. I work for AspenTech. I am been there for 25 years. I'm the product manager for the MTEL product, which is in our APM suite. Andy said that today that a lot of the valuable part of coming to ARC is getting to talk to people, see what's going on with your neighbors, your colleagues, and the intent of this session is to find out what's going on in the industry from a couple different points of view, and so we'll try to honor that tradition here at ARC. So we have solution providers, we have owner operators, and we have partners up here. So what I'd like to do is ask each one of them to introduce themselves and a little bit about their background as it relates to APM. And in one word or one sentence, what is the goal or mantra that you have at your organization in relations to APM? So, and I think I'll start with Sean. Would you start by introducing yourself?
Hi everyone. So I'm Sean Johnston. I'm a Vice President in Wood, inside what's newly been called the Digital Consulting Group. I've been Wood now for about 13 years, working across dynamic simulations, looking at optimizing dynamic systems, and now into a role really focused around digitalization, digital integration. So, pulling data out of control systems and manipulating it from that point and garnering intelligence. This question was the hardest question of all the questions I think you're going to ask us in terms of one word to sum up a mantra for us for a year. So I've thought hard about this. I'm not saying I've got the right answer, but for us it's probably scale. I think the industry's reached a point of maturity now where there's a lot of standardization around, there's a lot of proven applications that deliver proven value, and for me now it's all around making sure that we've got the workforce that can really support our clients in delivering that value through those applications. That's me.
My name is Eric Castro. I work with Braskem. The first portion of my career was in industrial, so I was in production management at the facilities. Learned a lot of things over those years, and recently I've been able to jump into the digital realm. My new role is industrial digital program manager, so I'm working to improve through digital solutions day in and day out life. So if I'm to sum up what we're looking to do this year, it's simplification. So what we're attempting to do is get buy-in across the organization. And in order to do that, we have to reach out and we have to help those folks so that they know we're here to help. We're not adding additional workload. We're not doing anything other than attempting to solve problems and simplify life.
Hi everyone, Nithiya Parameswaran, the Vice President Product Management for the APM Business Unit. Been in this space for almost 26 years in asset management and in APM. Started my career building asset management software for aviation, then moved to IBM Maximo. So was with that team for almost, I would say, 13, 14 years, even before IBM acquired Maximo. Then I moved to GE Digital, again managing their aviation analytics portfolio, moved to Rockwell, managing their analytics portfolio. Now I'm with Aspen. John said one word. For my team, I'll take the liberty to say two words, which is customer success. I think the big mantra is like we want to ensure that every customer who uses our software is successful. John? Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'd also like to introduce Pratibha, have her introduce herself. She's helping me with the moderation today. It's always good to have an experienced wingman. So, Pratibha?
I'm Pratibha Pillalamari with Aspen Technology, and I don't have one word or two-phrase mantra, but I have the next question for you. So how are you improving plant performance today with APM solutions? Are there any emerging trends that you're seeing? Eric, you want to go first?
Yeah. So I think for us, we're so used to having information available. Everybody has one or at least one, if not two cell phones in their pocket, right? So being able to get the information as quickly as we can is what we're looking for. We're looking for that in the plants as well. So if there's an immediate access to something, we we expect people to take that time and we'll get better results. Some of the things we're doing is Wi-Fi wireless systems within our operating units, trying to ensure that the folks out in the field, the day in and day out operators, they have that access to data, whether it's PNIDs, whether it's equipment drawings, no matter what it is, they need to be able to do it. Also, we get better results from work orders and the actual management of the system if we're able to input that information as we see it. So working to improve the access for operators is a main driving point that we're looking at right now.
Sure.
Thank you. Yes, similar threads, but I suppose slightly differently because obviously being on the services provider of this, I think for us there's been a couple of kind of linked trends. The first one is we've seen digital transformation come into the industry. We've seen a lot of value being created by it, but I think now there's a move to pull that back down to what we'd kind of coin autonomous transformation, really. So saying it's great to take data up the pyramid, to garner intelligence from it, but actually there's a lot of value in either pulling that data down somehow and not using humans, or trying to garner in the intelligence actually at a lower point down the kind of the automation pyramid so that you can actually act on that intelligence rather than kind of just telling a human to act. And that move really then towards autonomous operations. And I think the other aspect that very much links into that is kind of going are the days where we're being asked to come in and deliver a point solution that answers one problem. And as part of this autonomous operations piece, it's very much delivering multiple solutions that work in collaboration with each other to solve bigger problems. And really, to Eric's point, of taking humans out of the loop of doing admin they don't need to be doing. So transferring data across solutions to create much, much more value.
Hey, thanks, Rick. Looking at from a vendor perspective, right? So adoption of AI ML is like a big movement in the APM space. If you look at the consumer space, right, AI ML has been like well utilized, but it's not exposed to the customer directly, right? It's more comes in terms of outcomes, in terms of value. Like you see like semi-autonomous cars or even facial recognition in Google, in Facebook, or even like now, like if you walk immigration in Dallas airport, you don't even need to show your passport, you just walk through it, right? So AI ML is just embedded there, so easy, without showing the complexity. Now that's the challenge, what we are now trying to do here in the software space is like, how do we embrace that AI ML, but reduce the complexity, don't expose the complexity to the user, but in terms of, show it in terms of like, put your domain expertise, all the learnings that you've learned in it, leverage AI, and then give that outcome to the customer. So it's much more simple to use, easy to understand, right? But let's not expose that AI ML out to the end user because these are maintenance engineers, reliability engineers. They need more outcome to be seen. That's my take.
I'm a little curious about, back to you, Sean, that the autonomous, what'd you call it, autonomous, transformation, that seems like a high level of operational maturity for a company. And there must be some steps that people are taking to get there. In some ways, I think about my APC background, I think of, we're going to run this open loop for a while before we run this closed loop, right? What's the equivalent of getting open loop versus closed loop for this autonomous transformation?
Yeah, look, it's a good question, John. I think there's a couple of things here that, firstly, we maybe need to understand why this is becoming more of an opportunity now than it was. And the first thing I'd say is that, we referenced artificial intelligence earlier. Artificial intelligence can help us provide clever answers to the problems we're solving, but it can also drastically reduce the amount of time it takes us to get to that clever answer. So actually embedding that data science in the workflow, for instance, for which you're delivering your end use case, the end use cases are the same. But the way that we're approaching doing them makes it a lot more viable, really, for clients to afford and really hit these targets early. I think in terms of how we work with clients to deliver this, look, the clients own their processes if they're operating their assets. What I think is important for the service providers to do is make sure we're partnering with them right the way through the process. Right the way from the beginning, get all your stakeholders in line. These are all the people that are going to need to know to change their practices. And if you don't get those in right at the beginning, it quite often wavers off into a science project that never quite gets to any sort of fruition.
That's great. That leads to my next question, which is about change management in particular. You can't always move the needle with new solutions unless you get your folks on board, right? And there's challenges associated with that. And Eric, I'll start with you. What are some challenges and some ways that you've addressed change management with related to APM solutions?
So I think it depends on the solution, right? So if you look, we're looking to scale up all of these things, but we have to initially start with a test. We have to have a test location. And what we found is starting with that test location, getting the correct key players involved, not only that are going to be part of that initial set, but the scale up as well. So once you get that initial set, you're able to deliver value. You have to have a little bit of a PR campaign in order to get that information out there so that people have that buy-in before you get there. So you have to think long-term, even though you're assessing it from an individual basis, because some of these things may or may not function, right? We're working through an agile mindset, and we're trying to knock out multiple projects at the same time. And some of these will fail. We have to be open to that, and we have to acknowledge that fact, and we have to cancel it when it needs to be canceled so that you get that buy-in from the larger group. So individually, start small and grow. You can't start large scale to start with, and you have to have that credibility as an individual, as a team, and as a project in order to implement long-term solutions effectively.
Nithiya?
Sure. Just following Eric's point, I visit customers all the time. Like every quarter, make it a point to go and see our customers. Of the customers who have successfully adopted APM and where they've seen a lot of benefits is like they follow 3 Ps. I call it like the product, people, and the process. It's just not the product. Right? Product can only do so much. But you also need to carefully look at people and process as part of your change management because the people's responsibility now changes as you adopt the product. Process, like what you have been doing, can be automated, which means it can also be simplified. So people can't be doing the same job as they're doing before. Process cannot be the same as what it was before, and then trying to adopt a product. So I would say like in change management, for a successful adoption, it is those 3 Ps, people, process, and product. Sean?
Yeah, look, I can't add a lot onto that. All I'd say is that from our side, all we can do is help, right? So we're often trying to help clients with setting up, centers of excellence. Again, a lot of the products that we had maybe 5-6 years ago were very much driven by kind of scientists developing new things, right? Someone's gone and created some machine learning codes and started trying to deploy it on asset. We're miles away from that there. That was never scalable. That was never really going to take the industry by storm. Now we've got these set toolkits that are coming out in the industry. They're a lot simpler to use. You don't need to be experts. You just need to be educated. And I think we can really work with clients to make sure that they can set up that center of excellence, and we can support them through those journeys.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And sometimes the consultant can say you should do things differently, and that helps move the organization. It's a little bit about like motivating them to see some change. But if you can get the folks to see, all right, when we do maintenance in this way, we save time. Once you convince somebody that they see the benefit, then I think that's a big deal. And maybe I put these 2 questions out of order. Let's talk a little bit about the benefits that you are seeking and seeing for APM projects. I'll go right back to you, Sean.
I think the benefits, to generically talk about this, I think the benefits from APM services have gone up significantly, but because it's no longer just APM services that have been delivered. In the new kind of architecture we live in, we've got multiple products now working together to solve bigger problems that span across wider systems. So take something, that might have been production monitoring, which now is turning into predictive maintenance. Well, that now feeds into, I can automatically check I've got spares. I can automatically go in and start to plan maintenance. I can take all these little point solutions and stack them together into much, much greater, and that's, I suppose, the the autonomous or the automated transformation piece of this, using RPA or simple taking the humans out of the loop and stringing these things together can be really transformational as to how people can operate. So where APM before might just be kind of, saying, oh, this compressor might fail. Now it can actually say, well, this is how many people I'm going to take offshore next week, if you know what I mean, having much, much wider impacts.
And I think you can look at it, APM could mean a lot of different things, right? So it can get into the day in and day out aspects of your role and how are you managing your metrics from an organization standpoint. So I think depending what we're talking about, it can have a large variety of solutions. But I think some of the benefits that we're seeing are giving people back the time that they need to actually analyze their information. We've gotten to the point, at least in my company, right? So we've seen that people were gathering all this data, and we're trying to understand when the next failure is going to occur from a personal basis. That's where we've been the past 15, 20 years. And that time, at times, will put you in a position you're not actually able to analyze that data. It's just a reporting structure. So getting to the point that we can pull in vibration data and have predictive monitoring on major pieces of equipment and report out on that information, it's there, it's visible, it's easily accessible. We're improving the lives. Plant folks, I know most of you out there has probably spent some time in the units and late nights, late hours. So how do we give the time back to improve versus strictly firefight? And I think that's where we're seeing the biggest benefit is giving that time back to the individual so that we can improve.
Yeah, Rick, I totally resonate with what you said. And traditionally, if you look at a lot of almost every enterprise has an EAM system, but only so much the EAM system can offer. When it comes to with APM, even a simple task of moving from a time-based to usage-based, it is a big task. We have been saying it for a long time. Who is going to key in the usage of the equipment? That's a big part. You can easily trigger a work order. That's where sometimes the APM comes in. That's where we see a lot of value customers gaining, because you take the machine data, you do the usage calculation, and then feed it back to the AM system to move from a time-based to the usage-based. And the other advantages is, as you said, Eric, as the insight. I want to be aware of what's happening in my plant. What are those critical assets? What needs more attention? And even things like corrective work orders and preventive work orders, it's being created. What is the age of those? There are some that are aging there for 30 days, not being looked at. So that kind of a visibility is really important so that as a reliability engineer, I take action. The last one, which I heard from a lot of customers, is that now I have more time to plan for my maintenance because now I can predict a failure much in advance. And now I can coordinate with my production. I can make sure, hey, is there a financial risk if I bring the asset down right now versus maybe run it for another 6 days before I bring the asset down so that I don't affect my production. So those are some of the benefits that our customers have seen.
So I have a follow-up for Eric, because I think that as these folks get more insights and in less time, that's pretty cool. All of a sudden you have this technology that's giving you this information. But I have found that the satisfaction doesn't last very long before they're, okay, what should I do? Mm-hmm. That's almost as soon as you see that the technology is working on these these predictions, the next thing is, okay, what should I do? Are you finding that in your operations?
Yeah, I think that's what an engineer does, right? Most folks go into engineering because they want to solve a problem. They want to attack whatever the current solution, whatever the current issue is, or things that's been them in the past. So we want folks to have that time to innovate. And the only way that they can innovate is if they have time. If you're out in the field 12 hours a day, 6-7 days a week, there's no time for innovation. There's no actual time to think about innovation, right? So as we're able to simplify their workload, to give them back the ability to think what we've hired them for, right? We've hired engineers in order to improve our units. And sometimes we just bring them down because there's so many administrative things. So how can we utilize digital solutions to give that time back, to be innovative, to support and improve the processes?
That sounds like an opportunity cost to me, is what that is.
Yeah, and moving away from tactical to strategy-based, right? In fact, one of the customers said that they're able to now upskill their operators, you know. I think that's quite powerful. Clearly, sustainability is on everyone's mind, and we have heard a lot during our keynote, the panel sessions, everywhere else as well. So I want to understand from you guys, are there some specific examples of how you're using AAPM solutions, you know, to meet your sustainability goals or your initiatives that you have in your organizations?
You can first, me.
Yeah, you get the first.
Okay. I mean, look, the first thing I'd say is there's clear linkage between APM and sustainability, obviously. You know, keeping plants up, keeping yourself out of transient scenarios is clearly one massive benefit. The second one is slightly more nuanced in that with a good APM and kind of digital suites, a client can also, they can sail close to the wind, if you know what I mean. You don't need to have quite so much fat between where you're operating and that conservatism. And to give just a simple example, we see clients reducing chemicals hugely from these kind of technologies. A big save of money, but really big sustainability as well. I think the interesting stuff that we're starting to see more, though, is around, I'd say, circular economies and that kind of tracking and tracing of renewable and or circular product through systems. With things like sustainable air fuels coming in or biofuels coming in the front of things and even plastics. It's going to be interesting how this evolves and what APM plays in this in terms of that circular economy and the certification that these products through supply chains are coming from that kind of a system.
I think from a day in, day out standpoint, the most waste that we have in industry is startups and shutdowns. And that's either due to the startup and shutdown or it just happens, right? So if you look from an emissions standpoint, I work in plastics, so anytime you go down hard, there's flaring events. If we're able to improve our productivity, we're able to minimize those emissions events and help ourselves. The other things we do is pluggages. So anytime you have physical plugs in the unit, you'll shut down and it's going to take time. Operation Clean Sweep is a big initiative now. So it's a push to remove plastic waste from the environment. So how do we do that? If we don't put it on the ground, it can't get out. So how do we keep it in the pipes? How do we keep the plant running and functioning in order to drive that sustainability? And I think through the different tools that we utilize, whether it's vibration monitoring, the predictive maintenance aspects, minimizing time between reporting and actual execution of the maintenance work orders. Those are all things that are going to drive that improvement, to drive the reliability and improve us so that we can be sustainable.
I agree with all of that. Do you find that it's a difficult sell to say that by improving our maintenance, we're affecting the sustainability initiatives that are probably in higher visibility in other parts of the company? What's your...
I think it depends who your audience is. So I think you can get the buy-in from management. I think the difficult sell is at the ground level. The folks that are there day in and day out, I think those are the people that you have to help convince in order to get that buy-in. And I think they're the most difficult ones to get that buy-in from. Because, well, if it's not this, it's something else that's going to take us down, right? That's the mindset that we run into. And getting them to see it isn't a conversation. It's living it and actually seeing the improvement themselves. So you've got a longer time period that you're going to see the results and you're going to convince those folks. So
They say operational excellence, productivity, sustainability, they all go hand in hand, but actually looking at the numbers is what is going to convince someone, right? That I think is the harder part. Do you all agree, like quantifying the benefits?
And I think the number means something different to each group of people that you're looking at.
Yeah.
And the KPIs that we utilize needs to be looked at depending on who the crowd is. So from a executive suite level, the KPIs are going to be different from the ground floor, and being able to present that in a manner that they see the value in it is really what we're looking for with KPIs, right? We're trying to drive that solution, we're trying to drive that value, and the presentation and how we choose to get the values is really what's going to drive the results in the end.
Right. Nick?
Yeah, I'm going to borrow a term from one of my colleagues. I'm not sure if he's here, Mike Brooks. So when it comes to sustainability, he calls it as like corporate social responsibility. That term resonates really well. And he breaks it into like three parts. Like there's a social responsibility, there's an environmental responsibility, and a financial responsibility. Right? And I think APM plays really well in all these three categories. So if you look at like, if I can prevent, and as you said, Eric, like frequent starts and stops, that's where like most of the accidents happen. And then I can prevent safety incidents, right, to the personnel. Similarly, if I can predict an asset failure that might lead to an environmental damage, again, that is another thing where I prevent any environmental damage if I can predict the asset failure much in advance. The third one is like financial impact, like how do I operate my asset so that in a way where it provides a long-term profitability, but still I have a sound reliability practice, right? So I think APM plays really well in this. A lot of times for you to measure like both things, you have a leading indicators and lagging indicators to measure. I firmly believe if you cannot measure, you cannot improve. So the first thing starts with like measuring and taking insights into like what is your lagging indicators, like as simple as how many incidents you have, like how it has progressed. How many preventive work orders you have today versus how many failure work orders, has that been reducing? And then move into more of the leading indicators, right? So I think APM fits in really well in the sustainability initiative.
I agree with that. And Nithiya, we had most of our customers who are coming to us looking for APM solutions are looking for, I want to fix the reliability and have some predictability. But we have had customers come to us and say, we had a safety incident, and we think we could prevent that safety incident in the future if we just knew something a little more about the way this equipment was. So usually people come to us, safety isn't the main reason, it's the maintenance. But that's the side effect of these. And I think what you said about the environmental, startups and shutdowns is when all the mess happens, right? Yeah. All the waste, all the flaring, and if you can just turn, unplanned downtime into planned downtime, you can minimize that.
Or in the pharma world, the lost batch of a product that is extremely valuable. I meant in the pharmaceutical world, a startup or shutdown that is not planned can lead to a lost batch of a very valuable product. Yeah.
Do you have another question, or is it my turn?
Your turn.
My turn. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about what you consider a successful project that your company or you've seen with your solutions lately. Something that is a kind of APM gold star, if you will. So let me offer that up to you guys. I'm throwing you a hard one here. Something that the people are bragging about.
I think we're working with some ongoing projects at the moment in not just kind of APM, but surrounding it. And I suppose it's partly what we're talking about, the startup and shutdown procedure piece. And just to reinforce what we were talking about earlier, with some of the technologies now, like reinforcement learning and aspects, you can deliver quite quickly solutions which would have taken you years to present. And one of the things we were actually looking at with a client is around starting up a reactor. And what's interesting is when we talk about the safety pieces of it, depending on how this reactor shuts down, you can start it up in many different ways. And it's funny that even regionally, this company has different ways of restarting this reactor. Very led by SMEs, obviously huge risk in terms of, like you say, of not just safety, but fouling whatever the actual reactor's kind of
Yeah.
product. So with reinforcement learning, we're able to kind of effectively ask a computer what the best thing to do is and standardize around that recommendation so that they can then roll out a standard way for operating a very difficult part of equipment, no matter how it's shut down, with standard procedures, so they can really start to drive efficiency and that safety piece around it. So for me, that's something quite interesting we're doing at the moment. It just links into that whole thing. We couldn't have done this 5 years ago without going into huge amounts of physics over a huge amount of time. But with some of the new
Do you
techniques,
think that'll lead to the discussion of, we need to shut this down differently? Or is shutting down beyond their control?
I think this is more looking at unplanned shutdowns and the state of the reactor is during that unplanned shutdown and how they recover that scenario. So it's just an example of, things that would have been pet science projects, but now we can actually put, some engineering procedures around it with the use of some novel technologies.
So looking at data and patterns?
This is direct reinforcement learning. So effectively running a hell load of simulations in parallel and then asking a computer to work out the best step
Got
on a
it,
human.
yeah. Optimizing the process.
I think one of the best things we've done from more quality management standpoint that I'd say is gold star is some of the modeling that we've done. We have two different solutions. One is really a first principles type model for quality to help reduce waste, right? So if we're able to produce higher prime product, then it's going to help sustainably. So one is the first principles model, pulling in just process data. And another is actually a Raman solution and looking at some of our physical properties, which we don't know if it's good or not 2-3 days after the production run. So by implementing this Raman technology, we're able to tell pretty much instantaneously whether or not the product is good and make the appropriate changes. Otherwise, you're looking at 2-3 days of production. That's multiple million pounds of waste that could be generated, whether it's downgrade or actual waste. But being able to implement that has been a game changer.
Yeah, watching some of the success stories and customers, I think the customers who got the biggest benefit is not relying on just on one aspect of the product or one aspect of the technology. Like a lot of times, you're very tempted to go after AI, ML. That's just going to solve all my problem, right? But that's a buzzword, but it's not going to solve all the problem. Right? It's only an enabler, right? So different strategy needs to be taken for different assets, depending on the criticality of the asset and also like age of the asset, the different factors. Right? Certain assets, it can be just moving from time to usage, whereas certain assets might require an AI, ML strategy, right? So having that kind of a broad mindset and doing the necessary assessment in terms of which asset falls in which category and how I should be treating that asset is key to successful implementation. And that's where I've seen a lot of customers succeed. As you said, like you put it very well, Eric, like, hey, certain cases I need the Raman technology because I get spectral data. I need to do spectral analysis to look at the product quality versus just measuring like just output and emissions, like which is really that requires a calculation of first principle models. So you need to be open to using different methodologies.
Okay, and I think we'll watch the time here. We might have time for some audience questions, but I'll give you a final question before we do that is, what advice would you give for someone starting up an APM project that's it's something new to them, they're using machine learning or they're using data in a different way than they have in the past? What's some advice you would give?
I think for me, and it kind of builds off what Eric said earlier, no matter how small you're going to start, make sure that you really commit to the full life cycle of that project. So get all your stakeholders in early, plan out your deployment early, because if you don't take a full project to completion kind of mindset, whatever you're doing, it will wander off and it will be a science project. And it is just the amount of clients where we've gone through this with them and it comes to the final stages and they haven't got IT involved or they haven't got the guys in charge of the OT environments involved. And then you just get to so many barriers and these things just slowly wave out and don't come to completion. You don't learn the lessons you wanted to learn at the beginning. So for me, commit to the full life cycle of that project right from the beginning.
And I think it's understanding true implementation time is a big piece for me. It's baby steps. So if you look at it, we all want the final solution as quickly as we can, but think about it from an agile mindset and deliver parts and pieces. If you're looking at a predictive system for a compressor and trying to get it to be a closed loop system for you, if the capital's not there, start small. Start by taking hand rounds. Start by making a step in that direction to get where you need to be. And it might not be what you want initially, but you can grow and you can show the value by taking these baby steps to get to the final solution.
I'll just say 3 words: process, people, product. Right? It's a change management is very important. So it's just not the product.
I think don't run, walk seems to be the theme of the day. I've heard that quite a few times today.
Yeah, and I think I would follow that up with sometimes setting expectations for the project so that you have success criteria. Helps everybody involved say, okay, did we make it? Did we not make it?
Yeah.
Is it worth investing more to get us there? You know, so rather than it's a temptation to leave that wide open at the beginning of a project. But I think that's a good advice. So I'll offer the floor now. We have a few minutes.
I'm with BHS Corrugated. We're in the pulp and paper industry. We have been moving down the predictive maintenance path for a while now. And one of the things that I heard you mention, AI, ML, it's been a tremendously difficult to get labeled data, right? I think you kind of spoke to this a little bit. Getting your folks that actually can label the data, time to label the data has been a challenge for us, right? And the immense amount of data that we need to build these models has slowed progress. And I just wonder how you guys get around that, how you refocus the teams from the day-to-day fires to work that needs to be done so that we can avoid the fires in the first place.
Is it? Go for it.
So I think there has to be alignment with leadership. I think if it's not coming from leadership and they're giving and allowing that time and seeing the benefit, then it's going to be a tough hill to climb. So I think you have options. Typically, you lean on internal resources in order to do that. Think about presenting an option and having the cost behind it to utilize a third party, whether it's bringing in data scientists or engineer from an engineering firm. But think about other ways to get there, because sometimes when you're in the middle of firefighting, you only have that given set of time, right? So, and human nature is to ensure that whatever's going to keep me out here this weekend, that I can go and tackle it. Long-term thought process is not there and available if you're constantly in firefighting mode. So think about potential, whether it's through a performance evaluation and ensuring that it's a priority of theirs in order to get a bonus at the end of the year, right? Or whether it's alignment with leadership and getting those third-party resources to come in and help do some of that administrative data classification type work.
I think I would add that labeling data, you really want your machine learning to do that for you. It would be ideal, right? And so we've worked on some technology because we're hearing this as well. How do I help me label my data? So we use some machine learning technology to build machine learning agents, and we're trying to do more of that because I do think that that's a way to help people with that problem. We don't want, for example, when using our products, we don't want our users to be data scientists. We want them to know the process, because these are the sensors that are telling you the information. The data scientist is not necessarily going to know that. So that's where we kind of focus. Any other questions?
Hi, Amol Busari with Wood. My question is around is there a data model available for certain types of assets for benchmarking the performance of the asset? because you will obviously use machine learning to learn how that asset performs. But for predicting failures and such, how do you do benchmarking?
I was actually going to kind of put this into that last question a little bit. I think one of the benefits we're starting to see is a real standard. I talked earlier about a standardization of workflow a little bit, but with the standardization of product and the standardization of workflow and the move away from these science projects, I think there is very much this opportunity for us in the industry to start sharing this data better, so that if you're in pulp and paper, well, how many other companies that are in pulp and paper have this problem, right? So we need to move to a place where some of these, and I assume when you're talking about labeling, you're talking about labeling what type of failure it was, so that you can then correlate the data back to that failure, right? So I'm sure there are probably tens of thousands of these assets that you're talking about across the world. So the hope is that as we can start to standardize workflows, standardize the products we're working with, maybe we can start to build first guesses at times, but at least a good starting place from this, so that it's not all inherent on the person doing this first to say, this failure comes from this, and then correlate that back. But we can have these pre-built agents, and I think that's also kind of what you were getting to, John, right?
Are there products out there that can be a repository for, again, some of it may be proprietary, but if I have a Sulzer or a KSB pump with a motor that is expected to perform in a certain way, how do you store that?
Maybe this is almost like the next evolution, right? We've been in a number of OPA sessions where people have been talking about taking kind of software out of hardware. Taking data out of software is clearly another place where the industry is moving towards. So you're right. So maybe it's a case of, all the large software vendors to start using standardized databases for which they're storing and reading. I mean, that's certainly where I think us, as an independent integrator, would like to go. But then some of these things are clearly quite advantageous IP as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that our labeling is so subject to the operators, right? The operators, the technicians, and when you have a wide variety of machines across the United States and across the world, culture plays a huge part in the quality of the data that we get back from the field, right? And it makes it tremendously hard to do proper labeling and to really understand the data, right? After a while, we can start to automatically label it when we start to recognize the patterns, but we really rely on those teams that are on the field to give us the context, and it's been extremely difficult to get reliable feedback from the field. So.
In a way, we're talking about crowdsourcing our data here, aren't we? So I love it that when I use Waze, you guys all tell me where their cop is up ahead. I appreciate that. But could we crowdsource, models for equipment? I think I've seen varying levels of willingness by companies to do that, because I think everybody wants the models, but not everybody wants to give up the data. So that's something that we'll find over time when we realize it's worth it. So I think we have time for more questions. So you're going to crowdsource more?
So Vineet Lasrar from Honeywell. So the idea you suggested is, I used to work in upstream, electrical submersible pumps. It's not really crowdsourced, and this has been happening for decades. So in Canada, there's a company called RIFS that actually tracks failure data for electrical submersible pumps. It is operated by, it is funded by both operating companies, obviously OEMs, the guys who make the pumps that go downhole in the well. So it has precedence, right? Now, is it going to happen for centrifugal compressors? I don't know.
Briefly, I'd like to add, I just completed my master's in engineering at the University of Tennessee, and AI was a big part of what they're teaching today in that, and there are some government databases, one particularly on jet engines, 160 run-to-failure jet engines with different instrumentation packages, and that's the problem. Not everybody monitors the machines the same way, and so the detectability becomes more of the issue when you try to crowdsource from various machines, okay? So you have to be somewhat careful of that when you say crowdsource, because people are going to do it in slightly different ways that may give you different results. That's all I'd say.
I think that's a great point. Nithiya could tell us a little something about the GE engines. He's got all sorts of stories. I think that, are there any more questions? What I think we'll do is, in order to make the 2 o'clock session, is we'll close out, but I would encourage you to, you have some new friends up here to talk to about APM, and AspenTech, we have a booth. We have a bunch of people running around in these sharp gray shirts today, so you can talk to us some more. I'd like to thank our panelists for coming today and spending some time with us.